This is a true experience that happened to my brother and I. We still don't have any kind of explanation for what happened, so I'm sharing it online in the hope that someone might have some ideas. I mean, we can guess what it was, but we can't explain it. It happened when I was in high school. My brother is a few years younger than I am. Back then, I had a games console in my bedroom, and my brother didn't. It was a PS2. Those were the days. So after lights out, when we heard our dad snoring, my brother would sometimes sneak into my room to play games. Sometimes I would let him sleep in my room. He often just fell asleep with the game on. So I would be in bed by the wall, and my brother would be on the camper bed on the floor next to my bed. My bed was a little raised up so I could see the TV, even if he was in that bed. On the night that this happened, my brother came into my bedroom to play some RPG game called Tales of the Abyss. I usually fell asleep before he stopped playing, but for some reason, that night I was restless. I couldn't sleep or even feel sleepy, so I decided to watch him play for a while. After a while, not sure how long, he shut off the game and turned off the TV and climbed into the camper bed. About a minute after he got into bed, I heard something strange. I heard this really heavy breathing sound coming from down there. I ignored it, believing that my brother was just having some breathing issues. Maybe he had a cold coming, I don't know. I tried to just go to sleep. It was annoying. Then I wondered if he was having some trouble breathing, so I looked over at him. It was too dark to see his face. I could just make out his outline on the bed. The breathing noise he was making was really creepy. I didn't like it. It sounded like this. It was like this drawn out, raspy kind of wheeze that almost sounded like it had a laugh to it, like some laughter was being drowned out by the harshness of the exhalation. I hope that makes sense. It didn't sound like he was showing any signs of stopping. I lay there for a while thinking about what to do, feeling a bit spooked and also very concerned. Then suddenly my brother got up and approached my bed and he whispered to me, "Bro, are you okay? Shall I go get Mum?" I don't know what he was talking about at first, so I replied, "What are you talking about?" "Sounds like you're hurt or something. Your breathing is weird. It's a bit scary." I told him that I thought it was him who was breathing like that, and he said something that chilled me to the core. "It sounds like it was coming from your bed, but lower." I felt my skin go cold when he said that. Was there someone or something in here with us? I hit the light. There was a desk lamp near my bed. When the lights came on, we saw that the room was empty. There was only us. We were too scared to sleep. We didn't leave the room. We just couldn't move. My bro got into my bed, and we just stayed there until the sunlight shone through the gaps in the curtains. I have no idea what the hell happened that night, or what it was, and it only ever happened once, just that night. That creepy, laughing, wheezing, breathing thing was just a one-time thing. It is hands down the scariest thing that happened to either of us. This happened about 20 years ago. I don't think I'll ever forget it. Keep in mind it was a different time 20 years ago. Back in those days, I was an apprentice hairdresser for one of the top 5 ranked stylists in Japan. Training in that profession, at that level, was very strict. Beauty standards were a bit different too. You probably don't need me to tell you that, but it's worth keeping in mind. Back to training. It was long, and the time off between training was pretty much non-existent. We were expected to be at training even during national holidays. I'm not sure if that was strictly by the books, but as impressionable young stylists, we couldn't be seen to be refusing training. I think that I had about 3 or 4 days off for summer though, and I took them all at once. and a lot of my friends and co-workers used that time to head off back to their hometowns to see their families, but since I lived really close to where I was studying, I didn't use my time off to just hang around at home. I could do that anytime. I decided to accept an offer from one of my seniors to visit his hometown. It was really late by the time I finished work, and we managed to get to my senior's hometown at about 2 a.m. The satellite navigation system told me that we were about 15 minutes away from arrival. The roads were dark and empty. We were the only ones on the road that late, and there was no oncoming traffic. He lived in the middle of nowhere, so that might have been a reason for the lack of traffic. I remember seeing empty fields either side of the road. I kind of regretted coming already. At that point, I mean, what the hell were we going to do there? He should have probably mentioned to me that he lived in the rural countryside. I might have thought twice before coming. I just watched the road and tried to stay awake. I should say that I was the one driving. I felt like driving since I didn't get to drive much in the city. I might have changed my mind if I had known it was going to be that far to his family's home. Then suddenly something appeared out of the darkness in front of the car. A naked woman came running down the opposite lane of the road towards us. I slammed on the brakes because I thought that I had just witnessed the paranormal. She ran right past us. I looked in the rearview mirror to see a woman between the ages of about 18 to 20 years old. She kept running. Then she stopped and turned around and ran back towards our car. I looked at my friend and he had a look of disbelief on his face, and I guessed that I didn't have much of a different look on mine. I think the reality of the situation was we both didn't know what to do. I said to him, "Is that a ghost?" He replied, "I don't know. Should we just keep going?" We slowly pulled away. I was very skeptical because I thought that she looked so real. I made sure I kept to a slow speed and I kept checking the mirrors. The woman got closer and I stopped the car and I said to my friend, "That's not a ghost. Come on. We have to stop and see if she's okay." He agreed and said he would call out to her. It was so creepy to see someone naked running around in the middle of nowhere. Even creepier if you've never been to that place before. She kept on running past our car, so I tried to match her speed as my friend rolled down the window and tried to speak to her. "Hey, you shouldn't be running around roads like this late. Maybe you should head home?" He said something like that. It wasn't very well put together or sympathetic, I remember that much. She didn't even turn to face the car. She just said, "Oh, hey, don't worry, I'm fine. Feels so good." I could see her a little closer now, and I guessed her age to be about 18 or 19. "Why are you naked? Have you been kidnapped? Has someone done something to you? It's really dangerous to be out here, naked and alone. So we have to get you home," I said to her. She stopped running and looked down at the floor, as if in thought, and then she replied, "I ran away from home. I don't even know where home is." I noticed at this point that she was in fact wearing socks and shoes, so at least her feet weren't too bad. She stood there with her hands behind her back, looking completely lost and confused. It was very odd. I couldn't leave her out there. I told my friend in a hushed voice that we had to help her, and he sighed, but then he nodded. We decided to take her to the nearest police station. I had a dress that belonged to one of my female colleagues at work in the back of my car. Long story. I told the woman to throw that on and she reluctantly agreed. Once she was dressed and in the back seats, I turned to her and said, "Right, if you can't remember where your home is, then I can take you to the police and we can figure it out from there, okay?" To that she responded with something outrageous. "I hate the police. They're always on my dad's side. Please, can you just take me to a hotel or something? Hotels are safer than police for sure. You can stay there with me. You can hold me tonight. I'm a virgin." We were young. But even though we were young and often threw caution to the wind, we knew that we had to get her somewhere safe. It's a scary world out there. And if she said that to another pair of guys like us in the next car that came along, well, I don't even want to think about it. We told her that her hotel idea wasn't going to happen. She didn't say anything for a while, but then she handed me a piece of paper. I don't know where the hell she got that from, but it had a name, a number, and an address. My friend saw the address and said, "Oh, I know the place." It was a psychiatric hospital. We called the number, and a voice said that it was the security department answered. I explained to the security guard what had happened, and after we hung up, we got a call from the woman's mother. We found out where her mum lived and took her there. My friend said that he knew that side of town, but he hadn't ever been there before. The woman's mother was extremely apologetic over the phone. My friend spoke to her and he said he could tell that she was bowing her head as she spoke to him as some kind of way of apology. I felt sorry for her. I mean, it wasn't her fault. When we got to the house, we heard more about the situation from her mother. The woman we found, out in the middle of nowhere, had only just turned 18, and she had been SA'd by her biological father when she was 16. A few days after he did what he did, she stabbed him in the neck with a box cutter knife. She was admitted to a mental asylum because of this attack. No one seems to know how she keeps getting out, but the mother said to us that this was the 3rd time she had successfully broken free. What a sensational story, I remember thinking. We drove mother and daughter to the hospital at the mother's request. I could see how mentally tired she was by all what was going on. She was so polite and grateful. She really impressed me. I mean, with all what happened, she seemed incredibly in control of her own emotions. The girl didn't seem to say much. She seemed to like the dress we put her in. The mother apologized for not washing it before returning it, and we both agreed that no apology was necessary. Obviously, the girl got dressed in her own clothes. She disappeared upstairs to change, and she came back, and we took off. She didn't say much when we were driving. She was taking being returned to the asylum a lot better than expected. I thought that she would be going kicking and screaming. Her mother spoke with her in the back as we drove, and she said, "You didn't get injured or anything when you were out, did you?" "No, I'm fine." "Oh, that's great. I'm relieved." We left them at the hospital and said that we couldn't stay because we were already super late getting to my friend's parents' home. My friend's parents were really worried by the time we got there. I think we both wanted to tell them everything about the situation, but we were just too tired to go through it all again. At that point, I just wanted to go to sleep. I stayed with him and his family for 3 days. It was actually a really great time, and just what I needed, a break from the studies in the city. It was certainly going to be a trip to remember, I knew that much. We said our goodbyes to his family, and his little sister asked us for a ride to the train station. I said that it wouldn't be a problem at all. Just before we dropped her off at the station, she said something that scared the living hell out of me. I'll leave you with this because it's a thought that I think of regularly. "Hey, big bro, why does your friend have a box cutter stabbed into the seat back here?" Something really disturbing has been going on. It has really become a problem for me. Every Tuesday at around 2 a.m., I can hear a man laughing. That laughter, it really creeped me out. I really struggle to get to sleep when I hear that. It became such a problem that I asked a friend to come over on a Tuesday night. I think I just wanted her to hear it so that I could prove that it wasn't all in my mind. I had honestly started to question my sanity. It was not nice to be alone at night. When 2 a.m. approached, I was nervous that we wouldn't hear the laughter, scared that I would be called a liar by my friend or just seem totally insane. But we heard it, right on cue. It came at around 2 a.m. My friend is, what's the kindest way to phrase this? A very headstrong person. She is quite pushy and she likes to get stuff done. So when she heard the laughter, she wanted to do something about it. She said, "Let's go and complain." Everyone who can hear it will be on our side. Who wants to live with that? She headed straight out the door and I followed on behind her. You might be thinking that I was hearing laughter coming from a neighbor's apartment, through the walls, or from above or below. But I wasn't. I was hearing the laughter from outside. It came from the street below my apartment. It was as if someone was periodically turning up and laughing at something each week. It sounds completely insane, I know, but stick with me. We headed out of the door and down the steps to the street below. I was really nervous, to be honest. I didn't know why we had to go and confront the owner of that laughter when we should probably just call the police, but I also needed it to be over. I felt conflicted. We got to the bottom of the stairs and then we turned to face the direction of the laughter. It was really dark out. That's kind of normal since it was late September when this happened. We saw a figure beneath the dim street light. That figure turned to face us as we approached, and I finally saw who I dubbed as the Laughing Man. He was a middle-aged man. We slowly approached him. As we got closer, I could make out more of his features. The man was smiling. And right in front of us, he began to cackle that 2 a.m. laugh. My friend was headstrong but not stupid. She grabbed my arm and proceeded to try to turn me around towards the other direction. We began to quickly walk back towards my apartment. I knew it was such a bad idea to come and confront the guy. I was planning on letting her know all about it as soon as we were behind a closed, locked door. But then something else happened. I heard a rush of footfall approaching, and we began to run. Even though my legs felt as if they were made of jelly at the time, I ran as fast as I could. I could hear him gaining on me. I felt as if I wasn't moving quick enough. Why the hell did we have to go and provoke this wacko? My friend and I got separated, and we both raced in opposite directions. I heard that guy run after her. I was relieved that he wasn't right behind me, but terrified for my friend. I couldn't even see either of them by the time that I turned around. I was just alone, on an empty street, in the dark, feeling more scared than I ever had before. I figured that my friend would come back to my apartment if she could, so I thought that the best move I could make would be to head back to my place and wait for her, while simultaneously getting my phone. I was really frightened. I was on the phone to the police and I sounded like an absolute moron, I guess, because they wouldn't even take my call seriously. It's rough reporting things here, if you're young. I know that sounds like an excuse, but it isn't. I had a strange feeling though. In those moments, I felt as if the Laughing Man wasn't chasing me, wasn't near me. I felt as if a weight had been lifted. I don't know why I felt like that, when I knew my friend wasn't safe. I was desperately worried about her. But then I got a message from my friend about 10 minutes after I got off the phone with the cops. She was home, safe, behind a locked door. Thankfully, she only lived about a 20-minute walk away. I'm so glad that she's okay, but for some reason I get the feeling that she's going to tell me she started to hear laughter in the middle of the night. I hope he doesn't know where she lives. I never want to run into that guy again. He was terrifying, and now I'm scared to walk the streets at night. This didn't happen to me, but to a friend, and it's up to you if you believe this or not. I'm unsure either, but all I know is that this story really creeped me out. I could kind of empathize with him, because after what he said happened, then I don't know what I would have done. Anyways, it happened when my friend was walking home one night. He was looking at the ground. He's always like that. I tell him to sort his posture out, but he never listens to me. He wasn't expecting to see many people on the streets, if anyone at all, because he worked the night shift. So that was maybe why he walked like that. He said he stopped in his tracks because he saw someone approaching out of the corner of his eye. There was a person walking towards him. He took a glance and said that his first impression was, "Oh, the fair must be in town," because it looked to him like the person approaching was wearing a mask and it had kind of slipped down. It's pretty weird, but hey, they say the weirdos come out at night, right? He said that he stepped to the side to share the sidewalk with this guy. He kept his eye on him though. He quit looking at the ground. He said that when he got closer, he realized that it wasn't a mask. Well, not a mask made of plastic. He said that it looked like it was all human flesh. He said that he was freaking out at that point. It was literally about 2 a.m. and there was someone who didn't look real about to pass him by. He decided not to pass judgment. Maybe it was someone who was suffering some kind of affliction. With that in mind, he cursed himself a little and upped his pace to make sure he would pass by quickly. But then he heard the person speak. "Good evening." He looked up to give the person eye contact, as not to appear rude, and he was shocked by what he saw now that he was closer. He said that now he was certain that it was a mask that the guy was wearing, and the mask was elongated and stretched into a horrible contortion. He said it looked like Munch's painting The Scream. God, imagine that on a dark night. My friend said that he couldn't deal with the situation anymore, and he panicked. He turned and ran. He didn't scream or even make a sound. He just turned and ran as fast as he could. His footfall echoing through the empty streets wasn't the only sound that could be heard that night, though, for the man who wished him good evening continued to speak. "Good evening. Good evening. Good evening." He said it was as if the man was glitching out. He ran as fast as he could, trying his best to ignore it. He didn't stop running until he reached the safety of a nearby convenience store. He was really shaken up. He didn't tell me how long he stayed in that store, but I bet it was for a long time. This made me think of something that my grandma used to say. Out here in Japan, if yokai or ghosts call out to you, you should never respond to them. I wonder what might have happened if my friend responded. Whatever it was, seemed desperate to communicate with him. This happened about 7 or 8 years ago, but it still gives me the creeps when I think back on it. I used to live by the waterside near a station on the Keisei line. I was out one night with some work colleagues. We had a little get-together after work. It turned into a bit of an all-night session, so I took the last train home. I used to leave my bike chained up at the station because I used to cycle to and from the station home. I used to ride my bike down the waterside, the tidal flat. There was a promenade. That was the route I took that night, and the same route I always took, but after that night, I never went out that late again down there. Roughly halfway along the waterside promenade, there was a bench. It is opposite an elementary school, and I decided to stop there for a while and smoke a cigarette to try and sober up a little. I always liked the promenade because it had great lighting, even at night. It felt like the safest route home. It was summer, the days were still really hot and humid, and the nights weren't much better. The heat just seemed to linger in the air. It was really unpleasant some nights. I looked out to the water while smoking, and after a few moments I noticed something. Well, I felt something. It felt as if someone was watching me. I felt eyes on my back. I turned around and faced the school, and there was no one there. I wondered if I was imagining things, maybe a little drunker than I thought I was, but something inside me told me that I wasn't overreacting. I looked carefully, but I couldn't see anyone or anything out of place. Naturally, I lost interest and turned back to face the waterside. When I turned back, I saw something. I saw something off to the right in the distance. There was a dark shadow. It looked so out of place. I'm sure that it wasn't there before. The shadow was in the shape of a person, but the outlines were wrong. It was all blurry. I instinctively knew that it wasn't a person. I knew that straight away. At the same time I saw a shadow, A stench seemed to drift towards me. It smelled like something was rotten, but rotten in water. I hope that makes sense, maybe a bit like sewage. The shadow was coming my way. It was horrifying. I watched it get closer and closer. I was frozen with fear and a strange kind of amazement. I was sat on the bench watching, just completely not believing my eyes. The only thing that brought me back to my senses was when the ash from my lit cigarette fell on my work trousers. I realized that whatever that thing was, it was a threat. Realizing that made me rise to my feet and run. I didn't even care about my bike. I just wanted to be away from that thing. I just desperately searched for some light. I felt like I needed to be in the light. I managed to take shelter in a nearby convenience store. I stayed there until I managed to calm myself down. I remember hiding in the bathroom for so long that a member of staff knocked on the toilet door to ask if I was okay. I left and went home without further incidents. I thought about getting my bike back, but I couldn't face going back down by the waterside again. I woke up the following morning. I overslept, and the quickest route to the train station was via the waterside promenade. In the morning light, with a slightly more sober head, I thought about the possibility that I could have been imagining it all. Maybe it was some kind of strange dream or drunken hallucination. I approached the route to work with confidence with this on my mind. I was also interested in checking if my bike was still there or not. I didn't think it would be. But when I got close to the school, I realized that miraculously my bike was there. It was right where I left it. I was certain that it would have been gone. But I was glad to see it. When I got closer, I realized something was a little different about it. It looked like it had literally been dredged through a riverbed. It was covered in sludge, grime, and dirt, and it smelled horrible. It barely looked like my bike, but I knew that it was because I recognized the stickers. It was the weirdest thing. In some places it looked like it had been rusted or corroded as well. And I know that doesn't happen overnight. It was like it had just arrived from someplace else. There was a hole in the metal as well, which made no sense to me. I loved that bike. Did someone throw it in the water, and then someone else magnet fishing or something bring it back out and put it where I left it in the exact spot? I really doubted that. Still, I needed to get to work and I was late, and I didn't have a faster method available. So I wiped it down with some pocket tissues and hopped on. The smell was horrible, but I needed to get to work. I parked the bike at the station like I always did, but I didn't bother chaining it up. I thought that nobody would want it. When I got back after work, it wasn't there. I guess that someone stole it. Probably some homeless guy. No matter, I thought to myself. I was probably only going to sell it or scrap it anyways. Here's where things get very weird and probably unbelievable from your point of view. A few days later, I read in the local news that a homeless man had passed away. Sad, but not really connected, right? Wrong. I kind of feel like it's connected. The homeless guy died covered in something they said was foul smelling, something like sludge. He died in a park far from the waterfront. It just didn't seem possible. If my bike was stolen by that guy and it smelled how it did when I left it, could the two be related? Did he save me somehow? Or were these two incidences merely coincidences? Or is there something more at play? Something that began with me seeing that strange shadowy figure down by the promenade. I don't think I'll ever know. But I never walk down by the waterfront at night anymore. I don't want to see that shadowy figure ever again. This didn't happen to me, but to my mum. Back when my mother was single and living alone, she worked as an admin assistant in an office. Like I said, she was living alone in a small apartment. She said that the guy who lived next door to her was kind of off. She had a weird feeling about him. The reason why she thought he was strange was because on several occasions when she tried to say hello to him, he didn't respond. He just stood there with a blank expression on his face, staring at her. She said she didn't like it. She didn't know what he was thinking, and she gave up trying to be pleasant after about the third attempt of saying hello to him. One night, she woke up in the middle of the night for a reason she couldn't put her finger on. She didn't need the bathroom, and she hadn't heard any loud noises. She just woke up. She said that she was having a very long and intricate dream. She was in a deep state of sleep, and suddenly she was awake. She said it was like a switch had been flipped, and just as mysteriously as she awoken, a question jumped to the forefront of her mind. Did I lock the door? After that intrusive question entered her mind, she couldn't make it leave. It lingered, and worry began to set in as she lay in bed, in the dark. Like an itch that needed scratching, she felt as if she had to go and check. She crept over to the door and realized that the door was unlocked, just as she feared. She blamed it on her own carelessness and turned the key and locked the door. In that exact moment, she felt the doorknob slowly and silently twist in her hand. She was incredibly frightened, but she managed to retain her composure and keep quiet. She had only just turned the key in the door, and had she hesitated a second longer, then the person the other side of the door would have been opening an unlocked door. She put her eye to the peephole and saw the figure of a man outside. She recognized him almost instantly as the neighbor next door. She covered her mouth as not to scream as the door knob slowly turned again. A few agonizing seconds crawled by, and then her neighbor gave up and walked away. Now, my mum has a trusting kind of nature, so she decided she would put this down as her neighbor making an honest mistake and mistaking his apartment for hers, maybe even got a little drunk. She decided not to worry about it. A couple of days went by and her neighbor moved out of the apartment complex. It was around the same time as my mum wanted to move out too. She was cleaning and packing her things away when she noticed something. She was cleaning one of her balcony windows at the time. It was particularly fogged up in the top right corner. On closer inspection, she saw fingerprints on the glass. The fingerprints were on the outside of the balcony window. She didn't know how they could have gotten there at first, but then she remembered something. Her creepy, unresponsive neighbor that lived on the right-hand side. And that was where she found the fingerprints. There had to be a connection. She stepped out onto her balcony and took a look at the railing, and there were some traces of fingerprints there too. It looked as if the man next door was climbing over the balcony partition and peering into her apartment. My mum laughed when she told me this story. I couldn't believe it. She literally never gets up at night. She's a total sound sleeper, but that night intuition kicked in and made her make sure that the door was locked. I think if you wake up in the dead of night with a similar concern or a strange feeling like my mum had, get up. There is one thing that freaks me out. If the neighbor got the apartment wrong, why didn't he try to put the key in the lock? Why would he just silently turn the door handle? It freaks me out to imagine what her neighbor's intentions were.